This is what I'm talking about. Anarchy in action. Officials have eyes focused on radicals ahead of G8 and G20 summits after act of terrorism in Ottawa. Like, this is exactly what we've been afraid of happening, right? Something getting labeled as terrorism. I don't necessarily agree with a firebombing of a bank, but I don't agree with the bank, and I don't agree with the cops treating people like they're anarchists and terrorists. Riot police staged baton charges to dispose several hundred protesters gathered around the Bank of England in the heart of London's financial centre during last year's G20. And then we have Mr. Stephen Harper, an activist group calling themselves FFFC Ottawa, took credit for last Tuesday's firebombing of a Royal Bank branch in Ottawa. Prime Minister Stephen Harper, above, takes part in a question and answer on the G8 and G20 summits during National Youth Caucus of Parliament Hill last week. The anarchists are organizing, and though police won't say it, security experts suspect that with the G8 and G20 summits just weeks away, they're being watched as closely as Al-Qaeda. Garbage. It's all garbage. It's all get the general public to think that everybody, the terrorists, are out to justify the means for having all these cops there.
And excuse me, Matthew?
Yes?
You wanted the number 6?
I wanted the number 6, please. This is just my take on things. Like, they raised their profile last week with the firebombing of an Ottawa bank and suggestion of similar acts during the upcoming gatherings of world leaders in Huntsville and Toronto. Note that it's in Huntsville and Toronto, and the Queen is coming at the same time. Huntsville is where the G8, I believe, is going to be, and the G20 is in Toronto. That's to get everybody going mad about the G20. It's the G8 that really we got to sit down and talk about, because it's those major leaders that are running the world a lot more closely than the G20. This is beyond vandalism, quote. This is beyond taking a brick and throwing it in a bay window. Security expert and former CSIS agent Michael Janu Katsuya said about the early morning Tuesday firebombing in an Ottawa RBC. This is really someone who crossed the line here and did an act of terrorism. Thank you, Mr. CSIS agent. In an online video taking credit for the attack, the apparent firebombers call themselves FFFC. Through Ontario anarchist group Common Cause, insisted there is no reason to believe FFFC is indeed an anarchist group. Experts agree it has all the markings of just that. So they're not anarchists. They've just identified that they're not anarchists, but there's the whole article is anarchy, and it opens with anarchists are organized. Through Ontario anarchists, for starters, the plethora of grievances listed in the video: Olympics on Indigenous land, tar sands, homelessness, corporate masters, condominium development, social housing, the list went on. Like, come on, these things these are important issues that these people are upset about, and they, of course, are going to give them a bad name by firebombing a bank. The name of the group, complete with hyphen Ottawa, implied there are factions in other cities that that's just anarchist propaganda, quote, said Simon Fraser University professor and security expert Andre Guillermatos, adding the FFFC initials are probably bogus, meant to imply some sort of organization. What does it stand for? Did they even say? And of course, there was the reference to the Vancouver Olympic Games. Though over, the resistance continues. Of course, the resistance continues because the American police still have jurisdiction in Canada through the Olympics and then the Paralympics and now the G20. Now there's all this jurisdiction of these cops. People are upset about it, of course. And how else can you point it out? Not by bombing a bank, that's for sure, but you can point it out by talking about it and getting upset about things. But anyway, the resistance continues, the video noted, before adding of the looming Ontario summits. We will be there, quote. Interestingly enough, the rock-thrown anarchists in Vancouver this year didn't succeed as far as inciting the police to cause a major riot. None of that was even covered. All the stuff that was actually happening, there was almost riots, the cops just couldn't handle it, and the people were more peaceful than they were angry. They just all showed their numbers, and it was great. But none of it was covered on television, of course, as we know CBC is so dishonest. The police were able to weed them out very quietly. Even the people, ordinary tourists, were shouting at them to go away, he said. That was a big blow for them, so now they're trying for something bigger. So there you go. There's a justification that they're getting more and more angry and they're more prone to violence, like the Vietnam protesters. So what then to expect from anarchists at the upcoming summits? Quote, whatever their parade route is, there'll be a lot of broken windows on it, and if you park a luxury car outside in Toronto when they're around, you can expect that's going to happen to it, said John Thompson, president of security think tank Mackenzie Institute. If the notorious Black Bloc anarchist group shows up, which they have a tendency to do for events like this, that'll mean the acrid whiff of tear gas all through the street, Thompson said. A group calling themselves the Southern Ontario Anarchist Resistance, or SOAR, announced a militant and confrontational action seeking to humiliate the security apparatus and make Toronto's elites regret letting the dang G20 in here. This is the world elite, you know. They're not going to be doing anything but discussing how to infringe on our freedom. The June 26 march will be followed by a roaming street party, according to the announcement posted on anfos.ca earlier this month. Our goals aren't to create chaos. Our goals aren't to create violence, said Common Cause member Kyle James. What we want to do is create a society without hierarchy. A society based on three principles: liberty, solidarity, and equality. Throwing a rock through a window is something that members of Common Cause wouldn't do. Though FFFC tried to appear as though they were part of a wider group, several experts said they are likely comprised of little more than two people seen on camera and the persons behind the lens. Exactly. Two people who don't even realize the implication of what they're doing, or two people that have been hired to actually make a video like this so that anarchists will have a bad rap just weeks before the G20. This is ridiculous. This is exactly what they wanted to happen, and it's like it's manufactured, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of a CIA or some sort of intelligence-driven manipulation of these two people to make this all happen. In the end, history always tells.
It looks like Salt Lake City, the first one, eh?
The experts agreed they represent a small group of people who lean on anarchism ideology to act out violent behavior, many times by infiltrating otherwise peaceful protests and throwing rocks in an effort to provoke police. And what about the police at the last G20 who threw rocks themselves? There were provocateurs. The cops, the people weren't even being violent, but it was the cops that were being violent. And this is very important, and there hasn't even been a proper investigation into that, as noted on The Nation's Deathbed by Press for Truth. I happened to get one of them given to an RCMP agent on the Hill this year. For some people, it's a philosophy. For other people, it's a lifestyle. And then there are always these little pockets of people who want to view themselves as rebels up against the system, and these are the ones who occasionally stray over into violence, Thompson said. Yeah, so all people who actually think that it's a full-on conspiracy are, you know, they're few and far between, right? And they're prone to violence, of course. By and large, it's a risk-free violence, Thompson added. The Ottawa firebombing crossed a threshold that put the radical anarchist community on par with terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda in the eyes of CSIS and police, said Juno Katsuya. CSIS doesn't even know anything. Like I'm pretty sure. Well, who knows if they're involved in anything? But MI5 in England and in the UK and CSIS here, they're both on the same level, I guess, kind of thing. But it's the CSA, the Canadian Security Association or something like that, CSA, that really knows everything. So why are they even talking to the CSIS agent? And as I met a CSIS agent, like, these guys don't know anything. They're just common people who believe that Al-Qaeda is behind 9/11. The only silver lining, and we cannot rely on that silver lining, is that technically these guys are not seeking to do victims to hurt people. Al-Qaeda is seeking to hurt people.
Yeah, for sure.
It's ridiculous.